Hour. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to start off the evening this evening with an invocation by Mrs. Bender, and then we will all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Miller.
Please stand in favor. Please, Lord, grant us the wisdom to make the best decisions for the citizens and to make sure we're civil and kind to one another to the best of our abilities, and that the world will be a nice and peaceful place. And I ask you in your name to grant our wishes and give us wisdom. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Bender. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Miller, any amendments to the agenda this evening?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, now I'd like to open up the floor for public comment. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. So if anyone would like to come up for general public comment, please approach the podium and give your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Anthony Stats, 9007 Clare Street. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who's come out tonight. It looks like a bigger crowd than usual, so thank you. I want to thank Ms. Bender for our awesome conversation we had on the youth of King George and the role we can play in the community going forward. The last time I spoke, I was a little optimistic about the way King George is planning and the way our county is growing. But the more I talk to more young people and the more I talk to people who are really getting their roots in King George, they're starting families, they're starting generational jobs, the more and more they look at this county, and the more they look at how we are planning this county and how our taxes are going up and how, our county isn't what it used to be, but sometimes that's for the good. And strategic growth is good. And Supervisor Kupka, you said last time, growth is inevitable. That's a good thing sometimes, but it's also a bad thing. Spotsylvania is a good example. Sometimes you can just have exorbitant growth in a couple years, and your county is turned into not such a good example of what a county should be. So I just want to pass on some wisdom to the board members. As you're going and planning and doing other things, think of the young people. Think about how this county is going to be, not just in the next year or 2 years, 5 years, but in the next 10 years. Because it'll be my generation, the generation next, who really have to kind of live with it and have to live with crime, have to live with new taxes, and have to live with congestion. So I just want to send my praise again to Ms. Bender and all the board members, because your job is hard, so I can only imagine the difficult decisions you have to make. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment? Mr. Fairfax.
Todd Fairfax, 623 Kings Highway. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'd like to continue my conversation about data centers, specifically on their projected revenue. When applicants include in their application projections of future tax revenue from data centers for the county, it's wise to be cautious. In an October 26, 2022 article by Peter Carey, published in the Fauquier Times on predicting tax revenue from data centers, Mr. Carey writes the following: revenue analyses, public documents, and interviews with officials in Northern Virginia suggest that the amount of revenue may be either significantly less than expected or, at best, an unpredictable source of public funding. And estimating revenue from data centers not yet approved, much less built and operating, is an exercise in futility, as one finance official put it. He notes that Loudoun found itself $60 million short in its $2 billion general fund and had to scramble to fill the hole. Carey continues that some local officials recommend data center revenue be used only to pay for one-time capital improvements or other locality assets, having seen the impact the reliance is causing on others in the general fund. In Prince William County, Deputy Finance Director Tim Leclerc has developed a model for the projected tax revenue of the proposed Prince William Digital Gateway. Leclerc's model projects only a little over 57% of the tax revenue projected by the data center project's developer. Leclerc said he based his model on existing Prince William data centers using their mix of new and old equipment with depreciation built into the tax revenue estimates. But he said even that is fraught with possible errors. In the end, he said, quite frankly, none of us have enough information to value the tax revenue from a not yet built project. To restate, projected tax revenues from applicants for not yet built data center projects are likely not reliable. So please be wary. And on a final note, thank you for your service. I have come recently to understand that it is neither convenient nor easy. So on behalf of my family, I would like to wish a happy and safe Thanksgiving to you and yours. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for general public comment? All right, seeing none. Mr. Dines, anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody receive any emails or any correspondence to be read? Nope. Okay, then we will close up public comment. And we will now move on to reports, members of the board. Mrs. Bender?
Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody coming out and talking. And some of us were recently at VACO and just came back today, so some of us might be a little tired from 3 days of meetings and travel. And I wanted to thank Anthony, who I actually spoke to. I was at VACO on the phone, and I'm looking forward to have conversations with some of the recent graduates at King George that Anthony's going to set up and hear how the youth view growth and planning and get some of their opinions on what they want to see in King George, because I think sometimes we assume what the youth want and need, and we don't talk to them, and we should talk to them like we should talk to every age group in the county. At VACO, I wanted to say so I'll just give you some brief comments, and I will talk about it in a future board meeting because it was a lot to digest and information. One of the big topics was affordable housing, throwing out a lot of new terms and using 3D printing to build homes. Loss of zoning rights for localities, a push for renewable energy, and even talking about pocket nuclear reactors, protecting from the state taking away revenue streams from localities and the possibility that localities will have to find other revenue streams. And one other thing I like to mention is I was nominated and voted into the VACO Board of Directors for Region 7. So it is an honor to serve and to bring back information to my colleagues and the citizens of King George, because I'll be able to interact with some more folks and bring back some information. Two other things. I was Ralph Bunch Committee meeting we had, and I also participated in a workshop with Healthy Generations to try to find out some fundraising opportunities for Healthy Generations. And I also brought back some information that I still have to give to Ralph Bunch about Dominion Raceway, and they're looking for nonprofits to help host to help raise money for nonprofits. So it's any nonprofits in the community, reach out to Dominion Raceway. They're looking for folks to partner with, and you get to share profits, and it helps your nonprofit. So that is great. They have a lot of events there. It's not just car racing. A couple other housekeeping matters I want to bring up. I was contacted by my appointee to the Landfill Advisory Committee, and I wanted to ask Mr. Miller this, could we look right now? She had told me there's only 2 people that have been appointed, and they haven't had meetings in a while. And we're looking to what vacancies are available, how we can fill them so we can get the Landfill Committee up and running again. And I also wanted to reappoint Ms. Tricia Molnar to the RAAA Board of Directors, or as I know, Healthy Generations.
Second.
Motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes.
And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. Mr. Granger.
Yes, sir. Everyone, thank you for coming out and providing comment. Thank you everyone else who's attending to understand what's going on in the county. Anthony Stacks, I apologize. Mr. Stacks, I appreciate you coming out. I do remember you from before as well, but again, thank you for coming out and being involved in providing comment. I think you bring wise words forth, talking about strategic growth, and I would agree. I don't think Stafford has necessarily had that. I am not interested in seeing King George be Stafford. I I do agree with Ms. Kupka, though, that there is growth and strategic, I think, is that key word on how you bring in new business in order to help offset the cost of taxes to the citizens without changing the dynamic of what King George is completely. And so there is a balancing act there to walk, and it is difficult, but that is what we're looking for. We're looking at the landfill and that revenue that will be going away in 19 years-ish. And how do we fill that gap so we don't put it on the citizens? And how do we meet other needs for the county as needs for teachers and fire and rescue and sheriffs and all of those services that are required and necessary for a safe and good community? How do we fund those and not burden the taxpayer over much? So thank you. And thank you for continuing to come out. Mr. Fairfax, again, number of times, and I appreciate your comments and always coming forth and in this time talking about the projection on revenues in regards to data centers. So thank you for coming and sharing that. I always appreciate that and the words that you bring. Other than that, I don't have any report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mrs. Kupka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening to the meeting. Mr. Stacks, did I say that right? Thank you for joining us. I am keenly aware of, or thinking, as you said, think of the young people who have to live with it. I have 2 seniors at King George High School right now. So they inform a great deal of what I do. I think about their future and what kind of county they will inherit if they choose to come back here. I hope that they will choose to come back here if they choose to pursue higher education. As I said, I am keenly aware. One of my children had a conversation with her father over the weekend and asked, why does the county keep letting all of these cigarette stores open up? So there are some things that we can control, and there are some things that unfortunately right now, due to zoning, they're allowed by right. But please know I hear you. And Mr. Fairfax, I did this morning watch the Planning Commission meeting last night, so I was familiar with your comment, but thank you for joining us here and sharing it with us tonight. And happy holidays to your family as well. Let's see. I want to say congratulations to Ms. Bender. Some of us were at the VACO, Virginia Association of Counties annual conference. Congratulations on your election to the Regional Board of Directors, Ms. Bender. I'd like to say congratulations to the regional champion King George High School volleyball team. They play again tonight at home at 7 o'clock in the state semifinal. So let's go, Lady Foxes. I want to say congratulations to the district champion King George High School football team. They play again this Friday night at home at 7 o'clock in the regional semifinal. I wish to thank Mr. Josh Colwell for nearly 20 years of dedicated service to our Planning Commission. Mr. Colwell is no longer a King George resident nor property owner and has tendered his resignation from the Planning Commission effective November 12th. I have already sent him an email thanking him for his service, but I would also ask that a letter be drafted that I could sign to send to him as well. Mr. Miller? Yes. Thank you. A letter for Mr. Colwell? Thank you. And with that, I move to appoint Mr. Ian Fox, who has served the past nearly 3 years as one of my appointees to the Economic Development Authority, to the unexpired term on the Planning Commission that ends on December 31st, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. At our last meeting, a constituent provided public comment requesting that each property owner's field sheet be sent out with the twice annual mailed tax bills. I have spoken to the Commissioner of the Revenue, whose office generates the field sheet and the property card and the assessment. Her office would have to generate a copy of it for each property, which would require additional staff time, then provide it to the treasurer's office. I see the treasurer is here tonight. His office generates the bills and sends them to a subcontractor for mailing. I spoke to the treasurer, and he is currently already exploring subcontractors that would allow for online billing, because he sees that as a convenience that we could offer our citizens, as well as the provision possibly of an insert in the mailed tax bill for a nominal extra fee. So at this point in time, the capabilities and the associated costs are being explored. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kupka. Mr. Collins.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Good to see everyone. Anthony, Mr. Stacks, I listened to your comments, and I've talked to you on several occasions regarding what's going on in King George and what the future of King George will look like. My ears are still open, and we'll take all that into account as we go forward. Mr. Fairfax, interesting enough that last night I had about a 2.5, 3-hour conversation with Loudoun County Board of Supervisor member in regards to that exact same topic and other topics in regards to what's going on. Now, if I may, Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question of the county administrator or Ms. Kupka? Because I don't know the information, and I believe they do, before I go on with my comment. So either one, what was the resolution at the Planning Commission last night in regards to the Birchwood?
I can answer. Yeah, so I did watch it this morning, and Birchwood's council was present and requested a motion to withdraw the application. And my understanding, Ms. Lackey, or the county attorney, that was granted, right? At the end of the meeting, the motion to withdraw was granted. So the application has formally been withdrawn by the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
I would just point out that I did send an email to you all that Mr. Payne had, the attorney for the applicant, had said that they were going forward with the withdrawal, and I sent that to you all so that you would have that information.
Thank you. I saw the letter, but I didn't know it was official. So that's why I wanted to know the answer, because I did not get an opportunity to see that. So going forward with that project, Birchwood has been a great partner in this community for 20 years. And I hope that maybe they'll resubmit that project, because I think there's lots of benefit to it. And I think that we can work with the citizens in and around in the entire county to make that a viable option that would make everyone happy. And that doesn't really happen that much in government. So that's my comment in regards to that. And I did attend the VACO conference and spoke with many folks around the state. There's some interesting conversations going on in the state with regards to most of it's economic development they speak of, and you know how people are getting things in their county and how they're attracting them. So I was open ears on that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thanks for everyone that was coming out. It's nice to see new faces, young faces. Anthony, thanks for coming out again. And like everyone else had said, we are definitely keeping an eye on things. Nobody wants to see King George end up like Waldorf, Stafford, Garrisonville. But growth is coming. We have a new bridge. And to try to dig your heels in and stop any change in King George County is kind of like trying to stop the tide from coming in. It's just not going to happen. So it's, do you want to be, behind the wheel to kind of drive the ship where you wanted to take it? Because it's coming. So, it's inevitable. So, but I'm sure the rest of us in future boards can see the surrounding areas and what we don't want to end up like. So, Mr. Fairfax, thanks for that information, and appreciate it. And happy holiday to you and your family as well. I was also down at VACO this last week or last couple of days and got to speak to just a ton of people. And it's amazing where, you get to talk to these people before and after meetings and steering committees and things. And, you start talking about one project or one problem and they're like, we have that exact same problem. So it's like all the counties have almost the exact same thing going on, land use, energy, all kinds of stuff they have going on. But it was a really good time to catch up with people and, and to find out what their counties are doing, to navigate. Congratulations, Mrs. Brinder. You were getting on the VACO. VACO has a new president, which is Supervisor Jason Bellows from Lancaster County. So we're at the gateway to the Northern Neck, and he's at the bottom end of the Northern Neck. So it's good to have the VACO president right here in our kind of neighborhood. It was also nice to walk around the vendors to the Mosley booth, and they had a big, easel set up with all kinds of pictures. And guess whose courthouse was the second picture on their board? Yep, they had our new courthouse was up on their board. So it was really nice to see that as well. And I'll get more information out. I mean, it was hard to get everything out. I did attend the two committees that I was on, General Government Steering and Environmental and Ag. And there was a lot of different information that has come out of those two committees as well. So that's all I have for tonight. And we will close that out and move on to the consent agenda.
Move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Moving on to constitutional officer reports. Mr. Jones.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Three quick things. First, Commissioner's office and our office were tasked back at the workshop that we had on exploring prorating tax structure. Ms. Hart and I, we were supposed to present that tonight, but she had a family issue, so she could not make it. So we will present that together at the next meeting. A treasury report with the receipts and disbursements. Beginning balance, $34,782,459.68. Receipts, we received $20,197,765.68. The county dispersed $372,204.85, leaving an ending balance of $36,608,020.51. And the final thing is Ms. Kupka stole my thunder. The volleyball team will be playing in the state semifinals in about 7 minutes. So we want to say go Foxes. And I'm about ready to run out there to go there. So see y'all later. Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Jones?
Appreciate
All right. Thank you, Ms. Jones. And Mr. Miller, if you would see those get into the minutes, please. Up next, Sheriff Giles.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As the treasurer alluded to, Ms. Hart has a personal issue going on, family issue. So I don't really have any information as far as the revenue goes, the money's wise, but as far as the enforcement part, Deanna was able to contact a California Imports in Ashland. They're the distributor for King George, for the King George area, and they agreed to run the cigarettes that we seized through their machines to get stamped so we could eventually auction them off. On October 25th, Deanna and Deputy Simon transported nearly 6,100 plus packs of cigarettes to Ashland and met with a representative of California Imports. The stamping process is more hands-on than just simply running the packs through the machine. So after checking with the Deputy Commonwealth Attorney Clark and Ms. Hart, it was decided to leave the cigarettes in Ashland to be stamped by the California Imports. On November 2nd, Deanna and Deputy Simon drove back to California Imports in Ashland and collected the seized cigarettes. California Imports was able to get all the cigarettes that were in cartons stamped, which is approximately 4,000. The remaining 2,000 plus loose cigarette packs will have to be stamped by us. Currently, we're trying to find an alternative source of manpower to assist in stamping these because we have to individually stamp them. So that's going to be a project that in itself. On November 3rd, Deanna and Deputy Simon conducted a cigarette stamp inspection on all the stores selling cigarettes in King George County. All stores were in compliance with the county ordinance except one. Upon their inspection of the tobacco hub located at 7975 Kings Highway in King George, they found one carton of Newport cigarettes and another partial carton that did not have the Virginia stamp or the King George County stamp. They also found several single packs of Newports on the display rack that did not have either stamp. They spoke to Abdul the clerk and Jamal the owner about what they found, and the cigarettes were removed from sales. The total number of untaxed cigarettes was about 20 packs, which is under the amount that could be seized. So they were left with the vendor. That concludes my report for the cigarette tax. And I'd like to move on to the Motorola radio upgrade update. Motorola and their partners have toured the tower sites and the preliminary drawings have been completed. FCC approval process has begun for 6 communication channels and a microwave paths. And subscriber radios are on order for all mobile portables and console radios, which they can go into use now, even without the upgrade going on. So when we do transition into the upgrade, those radios will just fall right along the line with it. So that's a good thing. On another good note, with the help of Captain Lind of the fire department, I being the sheriff's office is able to fulfill one of the objectives from the after storm free debrief that I mentioned. King George County was awarded a $55,000 reimbursable grant from VDEM for an all-terrain mini response vehicle. What I'd like to do is, I'm just letting you guys know about it now, and then for your next board meeting, I'll have that grant in the packet so you can review and go over it and hopefully be able to accept that grant. But that'll happen in the next board meeting. Also in your board packet is a letter dated April 25th of this year from Director Harvey of the Rappahannock Regional Criminal Justice Training Academy to the Academy members reference the bylaws revisions. These revisions came due to several members expressing concerns over the structure of the Academy Board and the Executive Committee. Assuming that you've all looked over the letter, and in the interest of time, I'll highlight the areas of major changes. Define charter members, define training members, define board of directors, clarified officer and executive committee elections, defined standard special committee formation and appointments, clarified budgetary process and timeline, separate debt services from operating budget, define the quorum requirements of board and any committee, and they cleaned up outdated and/or redundant language. You should also have in your packet a copy of the Rappahannock Regional Criminal Justice Training Academy bylaws and a copy of the charter agreement for the Rappahannock Regional Criminal Justice Training Academy. So what I'm asking for tonight is for a motion to adopt the revised and updated charter agreement for the Rappahannock Regional Criminal Justice Training Academy.
Have you looked this over?
I have not looked it over. I wasn't aware that there was an action item for the board. My apologies.
What do y'all want to do?
Chief, would you, or sorry, Chief, Sheriff, I apologize. I'm sorry. Sheriff, does it need to be adopted tonight, or would it be amenable to you if we were to have Ms. Lackey also review the changes, just to see if, from her legal perspective, if there's any concerns?
They are requesting, and this was at my, I didn't get it to you guys soon enough. December 6th is when the full board meets, and they need all governing bodies from the members to have adopted the bylaws.
Mr. Chair. So everyone's looked over the packet. Am I correct? And so basically it's what I see in there is just cleaning up verbiage of what everybody's part in that academy is. I don't see there's any problem with any type of debt or any other type of encumbrance that would come upon the county in that particular thing. So I would make a motion to go ahead and approve that as written.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes.
All right, well, that concludes my report, and wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. All right, moving on to report of the county attorney, Mrs. Lackey.
So firstly, I wanted to go ahead and just let everyone know today is my 1-year anniversary with King George County. So it's been a pleasure to be here. And the main action item I have tonight is a proposed authorization of a letter of intent with the Ralph Bunche Alumni Association. In large part, it's very similar to the letter of intent that was executed with the Visualize and Rise Foundation. It's a little different in that this has to do specifically with the museum. And there were a few drafts circulated. The final draft is with regard to the build out of the museum property, which, as I understand it from my discussions with Ms. Jordan, is what the current focus of the Alumni Association is to work on the funding for the actual build out of the museum space inside of the building. So I'm available if there are any questions on that.
Any questions for Mrs. Lackey?
No questions on that particular subject, but I do have a question after we finish that for the county attorney.
I move to authorize the letter of intent with Ralph Bunche Alumni Association as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Anything else, Ms. Lackey? Or
Nothing further. Thank you.
okay, Mr. Collins?
So I requested from the county administrator, and it was forwarded to me by the county attorney, the non-disclosure agreements that have occurred since my time on the board. I would bring to you all, and my statement is that I do not want either of them to sign a non-disclosure in my name unless it's been voted on by the board. So I understand that there are things that come forward that need to go into closed session that they would prefer to have a non-disclosure on, but I would like to have the ability to agree or disagree with that non-disclosure before it's signed for me.
Do you have a question for Mrs. Lackey, like you said?
Yeah, it was in regard to the legal issue, yes. Is there a problem with that?
So practically speaking, there are actions that typically have to be handled by staff prior to something being mature to be presented to the board. So my suggestion would be that maybe we look at that issue as part of the annual bylaws update. They're typically renewed the first meeting in January. So maybe that's a subject that could be addressed either as part of the bylaws or as a separate but related matter to proceedings affecting business of the county.
So with that, could you put it on the agenda, please? Look into that. And in the meantime, that any non-disclosures that occur without my signature or approval is not binding upon me.
May I ask a question? When you refer to an agenda, would you like to have that at the next next meeting? Is that what you're,
Whenever the chairman decides.
that's all. I just needed a clarification.
Okay. Thank you. We'll get that on there for you. All right, county attorney, and we're all set with that. Presentations and reports. So we have a presentation by Mr. Stello, Ham Radio Association. Gentlemen, step right up.
This is like a high school show and tell. Well, good evening, everyone. This is an informational brief for you. I want to tell you who we are, what we do, and I want to thank the county for supporting us because I think it's real important to us. Oh, okay. And it's important to the people of King George County. Okay. And I push the red button. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Amateur radio is a hobby. We are licensed by the FCC. We have to take exams to get a license. We operate privately owned radio stations. We pay for all of our own equipment. We build some of it, we design it, we set it up, we maintain it. Strictly personal hobby. What's unique about it is it's totally wireless. So we don't require infrastructure, cell phones, telephones, anything else. It's a natural fit for emergency situations. We have the capability of talking around the world. HF radios like this one, with 100 watts and a right antenna. I've talked to Mongolia, Australia, Japan, Europe. It's not hard. This is pictures of some QSL cards, which is a customary method of acknowledging a contact. And we often print our own colored QSL cards. Our organization provides funding for grants. We emphasize education, science education. We provide general scholarship funds. We also buy equipment and we train teachers so that education in the classroom emphasizes science. Okay. We also support King George County in emergency situations specifically. The picture on the top is my front door with the snow pushing up against it. The tent there is our setup at a youth day. We provide communication support for races, Marine Corps marathons, Caledon family camping events. We're very active in STEM. And what else do I have here? Oh, we conduct radio classes if anybody's interested in getting a license. Again, this is not just a hobby, it's a community service. And the head of FEMA particularly pointed it out when we had a few emergencies down in Puerto Rico specifically. When the power went out, they immediately lost telephone service, internet service. You couldn't get any information in and out of there. So we put together teams of people that we sent to Puerto Rico. They packed everything in their suitcases and went down there for 6 weeks. We had 2 hams from Waldorf who camped out on the roof of a hospital for 6 weeks, provided all the communications in and out of that hospital. Oh, by the way, the federal government has discovered our capabilities and are trying to duplicate it now. This is just a short list of the disaster support that we provided. The list could go on and on. In Puerto Rico, it was really critical. And one of the primary functions that we provided was to notify people who were trying to find out the status of their family. There was no way to get in contact with them, and we provided the link for them. And that was very, very important to them. We practice emergencies once during the summer, we have this event where we will go to a remote site. We'll take our radios, emergency power, put up temporary antennas, and for 24 hours, we try to make lots and lots of contacts. It's a US only contest. Usually we'd make a few contacts overseas, but we concentrate on US. Typically in 24 hours, we'll make 400 contacts. This gives you a better idea of the coverage of our antennas. The colored sections are states that we actually worked in that 24-hour period. We have a lot of assets here in King George. And one of the things I'm here to thank you for is the use of your towers. Now, a lot of people don't understand what the towers are all about. We put a repeater on the towers, and what that facilitates is our ability to talk all around the county. For instance, a radio like this or like this, if you try to talk point to point, you're limited by the curvature of the earth. Maximum range is 6 miles. No matter how much power you put out, it's 6 miles. One way of making that range farther is to raise the antenna. If I were to take an antenna like this and put a remote antenna on it at a height of 30 feet, I can increase my range to 11 miles. It almost doubles. Great. Well, not many people carry around 30-foot antennas. Another way of doing it is for me to change the frequency on my radio, talk to the amateur radio receiver that's on your tower behind the middle school. It's at 100 feet. We have it paired with a 50-watt transmitter. So it repeats anything that I say on the radio and amplifies it to 50 to 100 watts. The range, maximum range point to point for that arrangement is 38 miles. So I've taken a 6-mile radio, and with your tower and our amplifiers, we can reach 38 miles. Say, that's great. Well, there's also another little trick I pull, and that is I can actually make that amplifier, that radio, talk to another tower down the northern neck. If it's within about 24 miles, we can link that, and now I'm talking down Westmoreland. And then I can repeat that all the way down northern neck. So with my little 6-mile radio, I'm talking down to Reedville. Pretty impressive. Okay. We also have antennas at the Company 1. We have a lot of assets in our personal vehicles, and we have a lot of home stations. Give you a rough idea of what I'm talking about. There's 137 licensed hams in King George. We have 35 active members in the club. When we have vehicles, we have fixed stations, we have mobile stations, we have quite a bit of equipment. We also have some mobile units. The picture on the left is a 6x12 communications trailers capable of supporting 4 stations. It's mobile, and we use it a lot. It has everything you could want for a long stay. We have air conditioning, we have heat, refrigerators, stoves. We can sleep in it. We have batteries, we have a generator. The picture on the right, one of our members bought a surplus ambulance, converted it to a mobile station. He pulls a trailer with a pneumatic 40-foot mast. Both are owned privately and are members of the club. Here's a picture of some of our members operating satellites. And I told you one of the ways to increase the range of a radio like this is to raise the antenna. Well, it doesn't have to be attached to the earth. You can put a repeater in a satellite. We have funded, built, launched over 70 satellites of our own. We also can put an amplifier with this and a special antenna, and we can bounce signals off the moon. So we don't need a repeater. We can bounce signals off of an airplane. All kinds of exotic communication methods, and we have a lot of fun playing with this. Okay, well, right now we are, did I skip ahead? Yes. I wanted to introduce this concept that we are now working with adjacent counties to develop a emergency network for the local counties to help each other out. And what we're talking about is developing a WinLink and DMR capability. And I'll explain what those are. WinLink is a software package that you put in your personal computer. You plug your personal computer into the radio, and now you can emulate internet service. And if the remote site that you're talking to has an internet connection, you can go onto the internet. That's how you can reach out to all around the world. Any place that has an internet connection. And what that allows you to do is if your local communications is down, you can use the radio as a substitute. The other capability is DMR. And the sheriff will just talk about the Motorola radios. We have the same type of technology that we're starting to get into now called DMR. It's digital radio. And it gives you better quality audio, and it also lets you do digital communications, messaging, and in a mobile package. Very nice, very nice. Technology has come a long way. Okay, so in summary, we were founded in 2003 specifically to provide backup communications for the county. We are totally volunteers. We have assisted the county in a lot of emergency situations. We are helping the county in the school system and STEM and a lot of other areas. And we appreciate the support that the county has been already providing us. Here are our officers. And somewhere in the middle of that is me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stello. Any questions?
I have a question, just a quick comment. I want to thank you guys for coming. You talked about one of these cards. Here's my dad's card from the 1960s. And I couldn't tell you what this equipment was, but when I went with these gentlemen, they told me exactly what the equipment was, when it was purchased, and everything more than I knew. I just remember his radios in my dad's office that he had. So I want to thank you and appreciate all you do for the community.
Remember, it's not a hobby, it's an addiction.
That is true.
Anybody else with questions? Well, I do. Sam, before you run off, what does ham mean?
Oh, my goodness. There are lots of arguments about what ham actually means. Oh. And I don't know that it's been settled. One of the comments that I heard from one group of people was it was the initials of the three people who initially started the whole thing. The American Radio Relay League, which is the mother organization, was originally founded to provide relays, to provide electronic communications, okay? And the three people who started all that, their last name started with H, A, and M. So they called them hams. That's just one explanation. There are many others.
All right. Power for those units. You said you had trailers and stuff. Are they 12, 24 volt, 110? You got to run them off Jennies or what?
Both. They run off of 12 volts. There are 2 deep cycle RV batteries in the trailer. And I also take a generator with me in case the batteries ever run out. But the batteries last a long, long time before they have to be recharged.
And how does a ham compare to like an SSB or something?
SSB has single sideband?
Yes.
Single sideband is a mode for the modulation of the signal that comes out of the radios.
Okay. I had one of those years ago before the days of, satellite phones and stuff. I wasn't sure how it worked. I know it just did. And if it broke, we called somebody, but I was just wondering how those compared to one of those.
The small handhelds that I showed you are FM, just like the FM radio stations that you listen to. The single sideband that you were talking about, single SSB, is a AM radio that has been modified so that it doesn't need as much bandwidth as a standard radio station. So it's more efficient. Other than that, they're the same thing.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. Next up is Mr. Franklin. Thanks, guys.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I will admit I am nowhere near as cool as the previous presentation. I have no fun gadgets. And this is a shortened conversation for a broader conversation within the county. And I wanted to come to you tonight because we are entering into the next budget year. So it's timely for us to share this glimpse of our reality. It's not necessarily bad news. It's just the reality of our circumstances. And we've seen it coming for a while. And I know everyone is tired and it's cold and wet. So I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. Let's see. So here's a snapshot of some background. Don't mind all the words on the slide. Short summary is in September, we lost 3 staff members, all in our services unit. So that's our social workers. 2 were our foster care workers. So I currently have no one doing foster care. My supervisor is now handling our foster care caseload as we try to find qualified candidates, and 1 CPS worker. Where they went is one had a reasonable move. She went for a promotion to be a supervisor in Spotsy at Spotsy DSS and could make more money and see some career growth. The other 2 were taken by a competitor. They went to the private sector, Mary Washington Healthcare. In my opinion, and I would say it publicly, it's an easier caseload for more money. So I don't blame them. That's the catalyst for all of this. The bigger picture is that this is not a King George issue. It is a Virginia issue. It's actually a national issue. The national, I can't remember the agency. There are workforce studies being done by nationwide partners that do this kind of research. This is one study. The Claude Moore Foundation has done a fantastic study. I'm still working through it on their findings. These are their key findings. You know, I mean, in that first column, there's a critical shortage, and that is noted in the candidates that we are currently receiving as we are trying to fill these vacancies. Finding qualified people who can actually fill the slots is hard. Compounded with compensation inequities, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Worker burnout, just the workload itself is tough, and just a lack of growth. And I would say all of that is not a Virginia phenomenon. It's also a King George phenomenon. This is just a continuation of that other slide. So that middle column right there, that $32.6 thousand, kind of the median salary, we are just barely above that, honestly. The bottom percentage, the 15% vacancy rate, ours is at, where I wrote it down, 13.6. So we are trending with the trend. Just before I came, so prior to my entering this position, all new hires were essentially brought in at the bare minimum, the lowest possible salary, regardless of credentials. We have made some adjustments as we could with our local increases, but they've been very modest, and we're going to get to the reality of what we're dealing with now. So in that far left column, and this is just my local work. This is not the salary study for the county in by any stretch of the imagination. But we have the positions that we're looking at that I've tried to compare to other competitors, other agencies, local DSS agencies. So you can see the salary ranges for our Family Services Specialist 2 and Family Services Specialist 3. So a 3 is more of a senior worker. And when we compare those to our competitors, the trend is that we don't even meet their minimum. And those that are highlighted are the ones who just left us. So we lost seasoned, trained, capable employees, primarily because we aren't paying at what Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsy are paying minimum. And I know for a fact they are hiring well above those minimums. The middle column is the local DSS administrative salary range. And if I can very briefly explain it, we are a non-deviating agency, meaning we follow a state administrative policy, not the county policy. Our competitors they deviate in compensation. So that's why their salary ranges are different from ours. You may ask, why are Caroline and Westmoreland County not on there? Because they are also our neighbors. They're non-deviating like us. So their salary ranges are that middle column. However, that middle column doesn't really inform us of much because that is a statewide range. So that accounts for the most remote localities in Southwest Virginia, where the economy is very, very different and the cost of living is very different. So they can afford to hire somebody at $36,000. We can't. You can make more at Sheets, most likely. And then in that bottom right-hand square, you'll see the King George Public Schools social workers. So there's their salary range, and that's for only 200 days per year. So it's not, it's a different caseload and schedule, obviously. And then the Mary Washington Healthcare salary range, which that is only an Indeed estimate. They obviously don't publish that, but that's what I was able to glean from there. So what does it look like visually? What did I do, Mr. Dines? There we go. All right. So what does it look like visually? This is the same data, just put into chart form. So when you look at that top left, Family Services Specialist 2, you can see that, you know, my trained, experienced workers who'd been with us 2-3 years weren't even close to the minimum salaries in our competing jurisdictions. Family Services 3 is slightly different, but you know, those who are well seasoned and capable, more senior workers, still are not meeting the minimum at other jurisdictions. And then the one other most senior worker, I mean, she's been with us for a while, but she's nearing retirement. And then I did the same comparison with public school and Mary Washington Healthcare. I think these charts kind of speak for themselves. And then I also did the comparison with the benefit program specialists, which is not as dire. I have not lost any of them. Well, I lost one who went to actually Maryland, but for multiple reasons. It lessened her commute and she no longer had to cross the bridge. But I wanted to provide the benefit program specialist data for you as well. So then these are the things we've been considering that I've thrown out there for our DSS board to consider. What are some options for us, different pay factors where we can bring up some of these salaries and make some adjustments? The ones that I've highlighted are the ones that I've identified as key for us. We can provide a retention increase for 5%. That's in our annual compensation plan. I have completed an internal alignment to compare all of the service workers and address the inequities. And then also we provide an end of probation increase, which is factored into our initial job offer. So how do we come up with money? These are things that I've considered. We can continue to maintain vacancies and not fill positions. That'll save us money, but it won't get the job done. We could reduce to one permanency worker, so rather than having 2 foster care workers. I considered that for a moment, but in discussing with the unit, with the supervisor, we can't afford that. We could reduce to 1 self-sufficiency / childcare worker and not fill that vacancy. which we've had since, I believe, April. And the only reason we've been able to keep that vacancy is because essentially the public health emergency stalled those programs. So the workload is very minimal and the supervisor is able to manage that. Come the beginning of the year, that story will change, and we're anticipating the federal government will reactivate that program. So we will need that position. Considered converting maybe a permanency position, one that focuses primarily on our adoptions and resource family trainings, maybe to be part-time, but in everybody I've spoken to, it's really hard to find part-time workers. People want full-time employment, they want benefits. So I doubt that would even really be realistic. And then also trying to consider where we can find some cost savings in our local budget lines. But that means we are not assisting the public, we're just holding on to funds that we budgeted to serve our citizens. I'm also looking at different reimbursements that maybe we haven't considered. There is some ARPA funding, but I think it's only for adult protective services bonuses that would not impact the people that I need to get the money to. Tapping into some administrative funds through the Children's Services Act that we haven't really addressed in the past. Maybe using the Safe and Stable Families Grant differently next year, or asking you guys for more money. What I am not doing tonight is I'm not asking you for more money. And I think this explains it. So here's the bottom line. These are the numbers I want you to walk away with tonight. The top chart is showing our vacancies. The one CPS position you see, that has been filled. She started with us at the beginning of October. So we had some savings for a partial month of September. But then with whatever monthly savings we have for not filling those vacancies, we did have to account for leave payouts. And we had one considerable leave payout. But essentially 1 month of savings covered that. So then what I'm proffering is, and offered up to my board, and they agreed, was when I did my internal alignment, how can we address some of these inequities? And I offered up a 10% increase and a 15% increase for specific positions. So that is my CPS workers and my permanency workers, my foster care workers. Those are the ones that I'm losing. Those are the ones that the state trends say are really hard to fill. Those are the ones that I can't afford any more bleeding, any more loss. I highlighted the 10% in green because that's what I thought was reasonable for this year, this budget year. When I looked at the total increases, including some estimated fringes, obviously the benefits package fluctuates depending if your insurance is for a family or a single, or maybe you don't even have insurance because you're on a spouse's plan. That's the estimate. Now that's actually for the full year, so it's actually probably even less. And then below those charts, you see what the county is actually going to be accountable for, because almost everything we do is reimbursed, and it's even in our administrative funds. So I'm really looking at like a $10,000 increase locally. And so what are our key issues? This is to kind of sum up things. Recruitment and retention, and I know every department has screamed that at you guys over the years. It's hard to bring on new candidates. Our latest recruit who took the CPS vacancy, she took a significant pay cut to do this job because she wants to do the job. She's from King George. She has initial buy-in. I mean, she wants to serve her community, and she took a pay cut to come do it. That's not everybody. And hence my second point. We had a strong candidate for one of our foster care vacancies. I worked hard to get her to come on board. She couldn't do the pay cut. She was going to be moving. She wants to move back, relocate from Annapolis, Maryland, where she works. Their wages are much higher there in Maryland. And so I know she's going to go to one of my competitors. She's going to go to Fredericksburg or Stafford, who have the same vacancies, and they can and will meet her required salary, which honestly, in my opinion, it's a reasonable one. The candidate pool is very limited. We are receiving applicants. Some are stronger than others. Most are typically inexperienced, and it takes a solid 2 years to be fully trained. And I would say another additional year on top of that to be really comfortable. I mean, you are engaging with families, you are testifying in court, you are working with law enforcement, you are conducting serious investigations of serious abuse and neglect. There's a lot to this job, especially in our services workers. And not only are we trying to recruit them, we want them to stay with us. I don't know why they're staying. I really don't. When I showed you those charts, that's all public information. I just went on to the Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania County websites, pulled up their HR compensation package and put it all together, and that's where I got that information. So they know what they could make. Employees are attracted to the I-95 corridor. Prince William offers exclusive telework. Fairfax is offering exclusive telework. Maybe you only have to come into the office twice a week. We offer telework as well, but I don't pay the same. So even offering that is not going to put money in their pockets. A good portion, almost half of my staff live outside of King George County and actually live in Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania. I know our motto is the gateway to the Northern Neck. I would say realistically, we are the gateway to I-95 when it comes to HR practices. I don't want that to be the case for any other department, even mine. And then there's just the burden of the workload. I wouldn't say it's necessarily burnout, but the common theme that I have received my entire career, and I know my employees have, is people come up to us, we say what we do, you know, at a meet and greet, and they say, I could never do your job. They put themselves in danger many times. We are not identified as first responders, similar to firemen or police officers, but oftentimes we are the first responders at a home, and then we call law enforcement because there's a safety issue to address. I'm not trying to compare apples and oranges, but I do want to impress the significance of the work and the threat that we are potentially not addressing should we lose more employees because they are addressing immediate safety issues on a daily basis. And if we don't have the workers to do it, who's going to do it? And then when I compared, one of the things I worked on last year, and I shared it with Mr. Miller, was I did a workload study to see how do we compare to other jurisdictions, and then how many employees do we have compared to them. And what I found was, and I'll steal Ms. Kupka's words that she shared with me, we do more with less. Our staffing is below comparable and smaller localities. Essex is a smaller rural locality, and they have more employees than us. They have a smaller caseload. Fluvanna, Page County, very different demographics than us, different needs, and yet our staffing is comparable with them, which is kind of devastating to me because in my first budget cycle with the board, you guys granted us 3 employees, if you remember that. And I'm I'm indebted to that. I don't know how we would be functioning without those 3 employees. But even with those 3 employees, when we compare to other localities who are more rural, have a lighter caseload and a smaller population, we have either the same staffing levels or less. So why am I coming to you now? And what are we really looking for? So like I said, I'm not looking to ask for more money this budget year, but I anticipate that these changes that I do feel we need to make now, they are going to inevitably impact the budget that we put forward most likely in December or January for you all. I'm looking to make these changes effective in January 1. It's mid-year for our local budget. I don't see the changes we make this year putting us over budget. I have coordinated with our new HR director, Derek Messler. He's been a great help. We are talking the same language, and I am eager for him to get that salary study completed. It can't come soon enough. I've also worked with Donna on these numbers and shared that with her. So I'm trying to work with all the other departments to make sure that I'm covering all the bases. And we just have a history of salary inequities. Some people who come in with college degrees with lower salaries than people without a college degree. I have no control over that, but I am trying to remedy those inequities. And the staff know it. They know those inequities are there. And I am only targeting specific key positions right now. That's our CPS and our foster care workers. I am looking to align us with the county in the upcoming salary study. So I don't see this as supplanting that or replacing it. But this is more of a Band-Aid to stop the bleed, not to heal the wound. The salary study hopefully will heal the wound. But these are the actions that I'm wanting and needing to take now. I'm also looking to do a deviation study and work really close with Derek on that to see maybe we should deviate with like Stafford, Spotsy, and the city of Fredericksburg, and maybe not all of our policies, but maybe at least in our classification and compensation, so that it can really be a locally owned decision. But that is a year's worth of work ahead of us. So I hope to, hopefully sometime this time next year, that's what I'll have a solution for you. And then I'm also looking at the additional reimbursement options to reduce our local share. One of those options that is, I believe our Virginia Department of Social Services Commissioner talked about at our league meeting a couple weeks ago. He has put into this year's biennium budget requests funding to increase the CPS workload. That could be cut by the Secretary of Health. It could be cut by the governor. But that could mean some increased allocations in our base state budget, which could potentially cover all of these increases. But that's a big question mark. And that is all I have. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Franklin? Granger.
Mr. Franklin, thank you for coming out. Appreciate the brief and the information to help us understand your needs. I think we've seen that across a lot of the different departments last couple of years. So yeah, I appreciate the challenges and helping us understand, and so we can prepare a budget with that in mind. Could you go back to the bottom line? Is that possible? Oh, I'm sorry. We had the brief off. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Dines. So it was one of the last slides. That one.
Yeah.
So you show a 10% increase, and for the two vacant FSS2s, you show a salary of $47,000, which is obviously not 10% increase over the current salary of those two that were vacated. Is that the baseline, what you would be looking that to be the minimum going forward for that position?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I look to the right then at the 15%, and I know so just as you just did a 15% increase across the board, including for those vacant. What would you, just out of curiosity, what would you view the baseline at a 15% increase as opposed to, because I'm assuming it wouldn't be 52,135 and 51,429, it'd probably be less than the 49,450, since that's someone who already has at least 1 year experience.
Can you rephrase that?
Sure. So at the 10% increase for those last two, you show 47,000. That's the baseline. It's the minimum you would be viewing the salary for with the 10% increase.
Yeah.
At 15%, what do you consider the minimum?
For those two positions,
Yes.
50.
50.
Yeah.
That's still above those two that are above it, just to let you know that I'm assuming are people who have experience. And so you're looking to brand new hire someone who might not have experience at a higher level still, at a higher salary.
Well, I mean, so it would depend on the candidate, and their experience, and then also we look at the candidate's experience, and then we also have to do the internal alignment. So obviously, if I'm not changing the salary range here, I'm just looking at the potential hire. So if I could find somebody with 10 years experience and someone making 47,718, that top number, or 49, and I were to bring them in at 50, well, they would most likely have more. They would have to have more experience or have something more to offer for that.
I'm tracking with you. what I'm trying to understand is it looks like those bottom two on the 10% are like your baseline. That's the lowest you would go.
Oh, yes, yes.
What's the lowest you would go at 15%? Because if you say 50, you actually have people that are below your lowest you would go.
I got you. Okay, I got you. I mean, probably. Probably just below where they are.
Okay.
Below that 49 or at that 49.
49. Okay. Yeah. I appreciate it. Apologies for the confusion on the question.
No, and now that I'm looking at it, I understand the confusion with the 10% and the 47. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Nope, we're good. I was tracking with that, and I get why that is. I just was trying to understand it at the 15.
It didn't transfer over to that 15%.
That was what I was trying to understand.
Yes.
So, yep.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Skubka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Franklin, for coming out this evening and presenting this to us. So just so you all know, the DSS, our local DSS administrative board in a public meeting requested that he reach out to staff to try to get on an agenda because we knew that anything that we tried to do in the short term here to address the crisis that we're dealing with could have potential impacts, and we didn't want to wait until February or March or whenever we allow him to come present this. We wanted you all to know sooner rather than later. And then I would just remind everyone that these family services specialists, right, often are dealing with children and some of our most vulnerable, some of our smallest citizens and most vulnerable CPS and foster care workers, right?
Correct.
And then just one other thing, one of the sessions, the concurrent sessions that we all attended, a bunch of different sessions yesterday. One of the ones I attended was Department of Social Services, and Dr. Danny Avula, the commissioner, was there himself and told us the very same thing he said about the state budget. So he submitted requests to try to get more funding. We just don't know what that's going to look like if his secretariat cuts it or if the governor cuts it. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. And the commissioner is making his rounds to all 120 localities, local DSS agencies. I've talked to him several times at our meetings, and King George is on his roster at some point. So anticipate most likely an invitation when he decides to come. I'll send one out to everybody so that if you would like to participate, he'll have your ear.
Anyone else? Ms. Collins?
Mr. Franklin, thank you for coming out and thank you for providing that information. I understand the need for certain employees are higher than the needs for other employees. But I would caution on when you pull out a specific group of employees and give them an increase without giving the others an same increase. I don't think it's good for morale to put people in different categories. And I think that you would find more issues if it wasn't across the board. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Nothing? All right, Ms. Franklin, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out. All right, that closes up presentations and reports. And next up will be our public hearing. The King George County Board of Supervisors will now hold a public hearing that has been properly advertised to receive public input regarding a proposed ordinance to establish a method for refunding surplus personal property taxes on qualifying motor vehicles. I'll first ask for a staff report, then I will open the floor up for public comment. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and address before you comment. Upon completion of public comment, I will bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight depending on information received during the public comment. So, Mrs. Lackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a proposed ordinance that was discussed initially at the October 5th work session. And then we did have a public hearing at the last meeting. However, because the ordinance was not published in the meeting agenda, in an abundance of caution, we decided to carry it over to this meeting. The text of the ordinance has not changed. It is kind of a unique ordinance. It's based on some recent state legislation that just took effect in July that allows local jurisdictions to, in the event of a surplus, to refund or credit personal property taxes associated with the surplus amount from that tax revenue. And the personal property taxes we're talking about in particular have to do with personal motor vehicles. This is a bit of a placeholder ordinance. If adopted, it's a tool. It's not a mandatory thing. There has to be a separate resolution by the Board of Supervisors declaring a surplus for it to come into effect. Also, it's my understanding that I believe we're still have an audit that's not yet complete. So we are not yet prepared to advise if there is in fact a surplus. But were this ordinance to be adopted, if post-audit we find there is a surplus for the fiscal year projections for the I apologize, in excess of the amount budgeted in the fiscal year for the current calendar year. So it's a little bit of a mouthful. So the budget projections are for on a fiscal year basis, but we looked at prorating it for the calendar year of 2022, see how our projected tax revenue matches up with actual. If there were in fact a surplus and this ordinance was adopted, the board by separate action could adopt a resolution. And in that case, next year, come the June tax payments, people could see a credit applied to their taxes, or in the event that they did not continue to have taxes payable in King George, they could be issued a check. So it's a little bit of a complicated thing, but it would be to offset potentially the fact that people are getting a little surprised with their tax bills. People are probably aware that there is a shortage of vehicles on the market. So instead of vehicles that typically depreciate, and in most cases, motor vehicles are actually gaining in value. It's a little bit of a surprise on people's tax bills. So if there is in fact a surplus, there could be some relief given to citizens.
Thank you, Mrs. Lackey. Any questions for Mrs. Lackey? All right. Ms. Spender?
Thank you. What triggers the surplus? Like, how would we know? Would it have to wait to the audit or?
Right. So once we have audited financials for the prior fiscal year, we could see how the fiscal year budget matches up with projections for the first half of this current fiscal year that we're in. And then we could get a recommendation from staff, from the financial director as to whether or not the surplus exists. You all would confirm that by resolution. And then the folks who paid motor vehicle taxes, they basically get a share of the savings in accordance to how much taxes they actually paid, as in the form of a credit for those paying taxes next year, or a refund for those who, for whatever reason, do not have an ongoing tax obligation.
So if they sold their vehicles, what you're saying, ongoing tax, okay.
And so maybe to amplify that a little bit more, your auditor will be coming in December, I believe, to make the presentation. Is that correct? Okay, well, that would be the ideal thing, is that you would have the auditor come, present you with your audit, and then we would then come back to you with an analysis that shows you that you do in fact have a surplus, if that was the case. And then you would then do, as Ms. Lackey indicated, you would set a resolution that would then declare it, and then we would be able to take care of the administration of that surplus.
And a couple other questions. So when, say we had a surplus, now could we in a year decide not to refund it and maybe use it towards debt service? Could that, or do you have to always, if this was passed, go towards?
There has to be separate action by the board to declare a surplus. So, I believe there's also built in, it's a surplus more than 10% projected, because as I think you're all aware, people get tax refunds for whatever reason. There's always a refunding process. There's a 3-year look back. If people realize they paid taxes they weren't obligated to pay. So we don't want to end up with a shortfall. So there's a little bit of a buffer in there. But in the event that your projections are well above 10%, it would be the discretion of the board, by operation of enacting a separate resolution declaring a surplus, to trigger the credit or the refund to the citizens who paid those taxes.
And then one more general just information, because it can be confusing to some, is that this is above what we budget, like our budget. Our budget would be covered, and this is over and above if there's a surplus. I just want to clarify, because some people might have that question.
Right. So the state authorizing legislation gives this authority if there's a surplus, but there's no definition of surplus. So this ordinance fills that gap by saying what a surplus might be in the event that the board declares by resolution a surplus in certain circumstances.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mrs. Lackey? Mr. Collins?
Yes. So Ms. Kupka provided the 2023 legislative for VACO, and line 472 through 476 is a position for VACO appeals of tax assessment. VACO opposes the proposal to make major changes to the current appeal process for real or tangible property assessment, such as changes to the assessor's presumption of the correctness. So would that proposal affect what we are speaking of?
So as to a surplus potentially in the current calendar year, no. But
Personal too, personal.
If there were to be a change to the presumption as to personal property tax that would give citizens perhaps more avenues, more recourse for challenging the values that the Commissioner of Revenue proposes. But the current ordinance, I think I'm hearing, is only as to personal property. And if the legislation is as to real property, then there wouldn't be any impact from that particular piece of state legislation.
Okay, but just to clarify, it says real or tangible personal property, just so it has both of them in there.
In that case, then it could affect. So you would declare your surplus at a point in time, and there would be people who potentially would have a look back and recourse for getting taxes erroneously paid, refunded. But the ordinance does have that built-in 10% float, if you will, because you don't want to have a shortfall. So as long as there weren't more than 10% of taxes being refunded to people because of erroneous assessments through the tax challenge process, you would still have a buffer. And you would still have the opportunity to have a resolution to, you'd have to adopt a resolution to have a declaration of a surplus.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Lackey. Now I'll open the floor up for public comment. Is there anyone here that wishes to give public comment on this? Mr. Stats, welcome back.
Good evening again. Anthony Stats, 9007 Clare Street. I think this is a great proposal. I think that giving taxpayers more of their money back is always a great idea. I actually think this doesn't go further enough because I know this kind of just lays out what a surplus is, and it doesn't actually it just doesn't go far enough because once taxpayers have more of their money, they're able to spend locally in the community and it's able to grow our economy even more. So I know revenue and all of that and reducing taxes is always a tricky issue, but I think this is a step in the right direction. And I urge the board to adopt this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment on this matter? All right, seeing none. Mr. Dines, anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody received any written statements? Nope. Okay, we will close up public comment and bring it back to the board.
I move to adopt the ordinance to enact a new section in Chapter 14 Taxation, Article 1 of the King George County Code to establish a method for refunding surplus personal property taxes on motor vehicles as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion?
Can we roll call?
No discussion? Got nothing? Okay, we can go ahead with the vote and we'll go by roll call.
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Mrs. Lackey. All right, moving on to action items. 1112, Department of Finance, change order number 1 associated with security locks upgrade project. Mrs. Hahn, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I am presenting on the behalf of Ms. Megan Pitts, our procurement manager, who was unable to attend tonight. So I hope I do her board reports justice. So the security lock upgrade project was conducted utilizing a cooperative Sourcewell contract number 030421-SCS. The original funding source for this project was achieved through the fiscal year 22 CIP budget. A purchase order for the original work was issued May of this year. However, some of the locks were overlooked in the original assessment. And in your board packet was a quote in the amount of $34,288.48 for those additional lock upgrades. So staff recommends that you authorize the county administrator to take the following actions: execute a change order with Stanley Convergent Security in the amount of $34,288.48 for the security lock upgrades, and to appropriate additional funding in the amount of $34,288.48 from the Capital Projects Fund.
Any questions for Mrs. Hahn? I have one, just the top of your head, or you have it written down. How much one of those locks at the door cost?
So I don't have the full quote in front of me. I know this is a huge project because it's not just the locks, it's the wiring. Part of what was left out of the original proposal was, I believe it's over at Smoot Library, needs a signal boost in order for the range to go over there. And So it is a huge project, but for anyone who, like me, gets here in the morning before the doors unlock, as we enter into colder weather, the main entranceway, yesterday, one of my staff swiped 9 times before they were able to, and they weren't even able to enter the building. Another employee let them in. So that as time goes on, they are giving us more and more difficulty. So
I was just curious from my own knowledge, and I can't get into half the doors myself either. So, okay, we have a motion then.
I move to authorize county administrator to execute a change order with Stanley Convergent Security in the amount of $34,288.48 for the security lock upgrades and appropriate additional funding in the amount of $34,288.48 from the Capital Projects Fund as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. 1113, Department of Finance, award of agreement for purchase of a compact track loader.
okay, on September 6, 2022, the CIP budget was approved and appropriated by the Board of Supervisors. Included in this request was $100,000 in ARPA funds for a skid steer for the Solid Waste and Recycling Department. As a result, procurement issued IFB 1031-2022-1400. A total of 4 bids were received and reviewed on October 31st, 2022, and Carter Machinery Company Incorporated was found to be the lowest responsible bidder at a cost of $100,365. At this time, staff is requesting we transfer an additional $365 from the ARPA funds to complete the purchase. So we recommend that you authorize the county administrator to take the following actions. Issue a notice of award and execute a purchase order with Carter Machinery in the amount of $100,365 for the purchase of a compact track loader and to transfer additional $365 from ARPA funds as summarized below.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Moving on, 1114, Department of Finance, transfer FY 2022-2023 ARPA funds between projects.
Okay, on April 19th, 2022, the Board of Supervisors approved the remodel for the Registrar's Office in the amount of $30,000 with the use of ARPA funds. During the remodeling process, the Registrar was notified by the building official that an additional sprinkler head would need to be installed. The Registrar received a proposal from Cavalier Fire Protection in the amount of $3,500 for all costs associated with the installation. The transfer would be completed as follows: to move $3,500 from the ARPA projects line to the Registrar's remodel line. And so I'm recommending that you authorize County Administrator to transfer the $3,500 in ARPA funds as summarized below.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. 1116, Department of Finance, establish a budget for the courthouse completion.
Did you miss 15?
Oh, I did. Yep, I crossed it off. I'm sorry. Amend and appropriate 22-23 operating budget for additional TTF funds.
The clerk of the court has been notified that there will be an additional $23,743 available funds for the Technology Trust Fund. The Board of Supervisors will need to amend the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget to accept the additional revenue and appropriate the funds. As noted during the budget work session, the clerk will not spend any funds until received from the Compensation Board. So staff recommends that you authorize the county administrator to amend the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget, operating budget in the amount of $23,743 for additional funding from the Compensation Board for the Clerk's Technology Trust Fund.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Now move on to establish a budget for the courthouse completion.
At the Board of Supervisors meeting on July 26, 2022, the board approved the construction manager at risk CMAR contract with Branch Bills contingent on financing. At the Board of Supervisors meeting on October 18, 2022, a resolution for the courthouse financing was approved. The county closed on the financing on October 31st, 2022. In order to move forward with the project, the following project budget must be adopted and appropriated, the additional $12 million in construction. So staff recommends that you authorize the county administrator to establish and appropriate the budget for the courthouse completion as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. 1117, Department of Finance establish a budget for the public safety radio system.
At the Board of Supervisors meeting on September 20th, 2022, the board approved the public radio system replacement contract with Motorola contingent on financing. At the Board of Supervisors meeting on October 18th, 2022, a resolution for the public safety system financing was approved. The county closed on the financing on October 31st, 2022. In order to move forward with the project, the following project budget must be adopted and appropriated. Engineering in the amount of $742,691. Professional services, $2,356,332. Capital replacement of equipment, $5,939,226.92. Construction, $2,760,750.08, and contingency for $201,000. So staff requests that you authorize the county administrator to establish and appropriate the budget for the public radio system as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hahn. And I see no discussion items, and go on to 1119, Mr. Miller.
On the discussion items, I'd like to add to an agenda item in the future about the landfill convenience centers. I asked Mr. Miller for the contracts on the landfill with the 17 amendments. Originally, the landfill was at no cost to the county taxpayers. And then somewhere in Amendment 17, the county took over the convenience centers. So it's been a huge physical impact on our general fund. Each year it's progressing more and more. And this year and last year, the CIP items, as the loader we spoke of now, is getting this into a big line item. So I would ask that we have some discussion on this matter. At least see where the future of this is going.
All right, would you like to get some information for us for our next meeting, December meeting?
I think you have it, Mr. Miller provided the information.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Okay. What other information you want me to get?
I don't know. I mean, if you go through your package and you get more information from Mr. Miller, if you said you wanted to have a discussion, say like on our next meeting or something? Is that what you're asking for?
I'm asking to be put on the agenda for discussion. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, we'll do that.
That's fine. And what was provided to you was, as Mr. Collins indicated, the entire waste management contract, which does extend over 17 amendments. And then we also provided the convenience center budget and a history of that. Ms. Hahn put that together that shows kind of when the costs started happening. And I think it dates back to that 2018, 2019 period when the county agreed to take on the responsibility for the convenience center. And we can provide you information on that. Yes, I believe that's
The 17th amendment of the Second Amendment. And
I think it was in 2018, and then I believe some of the costs started to really hit us in 2019. Is that correct, Ms. Hahn? I think that's what her indication indicated. But we're happy to have this.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have any more questions, you can get to Mr. Miller, and then we will get it on the agenda for our December meeting, and then everybody can get more information on that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mrs. Lackey.
If I may, just because it's a related topic, I have been having some discussions with Waste Management's attorney about yet another amendment to the MOU. So I'll be prepared to discuss that as well, most likely at the next meeting as part of that discussion item.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Miller.
Okay, so I would just provide you, it's a very brief report. The first thing I would just remind you is that we are scheduling a groundbreaking ceremony on December 8th at the new courthouse site, and that'll be at 1 p.m. We'll be working with Sheriff Giles and Court Clerk Mr. Mason and myself, and we'll put together, I know that Mr. Mason has sent out invitations to a number of people that are outside the county or, that normally are not in these kind of meetings, judges and some of the other folks. And so, we're working with the contractor, Branch Builds, and our architects. So, should be a really nice event to, if you haven't been by yet, they basically cleared the entire site. So, they're moving. And so, and we have regular meetings every 2 weeks with the architect and with the contractor, and we discuss all the various aspects of the project. So I'm assuming it'll come from Mr. Mason in terms of your actual invite and what we're doing there, but look for that very soon. To-do list updates, just wanted to provide you again with the information. There's no real, there's a few kind of minor things about, obviously, you guys adopted the surplus ordinance, and we set up a funding line, a GL code for the courthouse project and for the radio system. And so those things are updated in here. Again, as you remember, we have the red line, or the red highlighted are any kind of new additions. And then as per your request, you wanted to keep the items that are on the list that have been completed or no longer are applicable. Those are in yellow, and those are at the back of the document. So just to let you know, but we're certainly probably going to have a good discussion staff-wise about a number of the projects that we have out there. We have a lot of capital projects going, and we want to just keep you guys up to speed on that. The other item would be the November anniversaries, new hires. I think that's on the next page. So there's all of our folks. Donna still here, 2 years. And then Miss Lackey, obviously, 1 year. I didn't realize it was today. We got you a cake or something. But that's your list of employees with anniversaries in November. That's it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Collins?
Mr. Chairman, can we add to the to-do list for Mr. Miller? He mentioned the courthouse project. Could he give us either 30 or 60-day updates in regards to the courthouse and its progression, and especially if there's going to be dipping into those funds of change orders. I think I'd rather know ahead of time before it starts getting too much.
When did you say your meetings were? You said every,
We generally meet every 2 weeks. We've been meeting on site the last couple meetings. Some of them are not always on site just because schedule, but we do have a meeting with the architect and the project representative from the architects from Mosley's group. And then we have the contractor there with their folks. And we just, essentially we're going over making sure that there's coordination and they're sticking with their schedule. I'm happy to provide that information to the board if you're interested in, where we are on the project and that kind of stuff. So.
would that answer your questions, Ms. Collins? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller. No other questions for Mr. Miller? All right.
Move to adjourn until December 6th at 6:30 PM in the board move.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned.